I have clients who've gotten 6-figure book deals and been assigned like the top publicist in the company. One particular book wasn't selling in huge numbers by day, it was either day 2 or 3. That publicist was gone working on another book and he had no support.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan show. I'm so delighted you could join us. My intention in doing this show is to provide information, insight, and comfort to people all over the world by helping to answer life's unanswerable questions. And boy, do I have a treat for you this week. I've got Lisa Tenner on. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Julie. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so delighted. You guys are going to love Lisa because she's an award-winning author. She's a coach on writing and also on publishing. And she's a speaker. And she's a graduate of my angelic attended training. So I think that makes her extra special and brilliant, of course. But I asked Lisa to come on because I have so many clients and people who listen to the show who have ideas and want to write a book. And she's an expert. So I thought, let's just see what kind of different things, different tips she can share with us and have her share her knowledge with us for those of you that are thinking of writing a book. So Lisa, again, welcome to the show. I'm delighted that you could join us. You're a leading authority on book writing and proposal development, and you have a long list of clients who have signed with all the biggest publishing houses in the world and have gotten great big advances on their books. What inspires you to inspire authors?
Oh, wow. I think that a lot of our gifts show up early in life. And I come from a family of teachers. So I think I am a lifelong learner and also teacher. So I love teaching people and coaching people. And I'm very experiential about it. So I think that's a piece. And, I've had this kind of interesting trajectory that's kind of more like this or weaving of different things like this. That have led me on this path. And while I love to write, and the muse has been incredible. Every morning now I'm writing pages and pages of poetry, which I didn't expect, and more books too. But I think, part of my purpose of being here is to share how to do that, right? To share how to tap into our creativity and also the specifics of doing it in a way that is going to help you meet your goals.
Tell us a little bit about your trajectory. What was the catalyst that got you to write your first book, and tell us about it?
So I was lying in bed and not being able to fall asleep. I was feeling all this anger. And it was like the anger was in my body and I didn't know what to do with it. I just felt like I wanted to run away. And I'd been studying polarity therapy because it was helping me heal. And I thought, what if I just experience this anger as energy? This is like fire energy just coursing through my body. And I did that and I felt great, but I was so energized. There was no way I was going to fall asleep then. So I started to write about it. And I thought, this could be a book. This could help other people in looking at other ways to deal with their anger. And I came up, again, that part about being experiential, I came up with all these creative exercises to help people connect with their creativity and their sense of humor and playfulness and other aspects, their inner wisdom to deal with anger. And when I did that, it was powerful for them. And it was also, for my readers. But it also just opened the door to using what I learned in writing that book to help people write their books. So that, believe it or not, is the short version.
Oh my gosh. And then how many books have you published since then?
So I have published 2 of my own books. And then I've been in a couple of anthologies of creativity coaches that are edited by Eric Meisel, who's an incredible creativity coach and leader really in that arena. But I I also have helped dozens and dozens of authors write their books and publish them, both traditionally published and self-published. And I've done both, and right now there's a lot of good reasons to independently publish. So I wouldn't write it off just because you think a publisher is going to get you into more hands, because sometimes that really isn't the case. And also, they're going to expect that you are going to do the majority of the selling, no matter what, and that you bring a huge audience with you. And unless it's a small publisher, then they expect that you bring a good size audience with you. But yeah, it really is very independent, and sometimes it makes a lot of sense to traditionally publish, and other times it really makes sense to independently publish.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I have several friends who are New York Times bestselling authors, like multiple New York Times bestselling authors. And every one of them said, you don't need the publishing companies. They're not doing anything for these authors with huge followings that have. One gal we had on the show, Karen White, I think she's written 32 best-selling books. And she does all her own marketing, all her own, publicity, all that kind of stuff. So what is the advantage of going with a big publisher? Is it the advance at this point? Is that pretty much the only thing that is really the compelling reason to go with a big publisher?
Yeah. And I want to answer that. I want to just mention, too, that those traditionally published authors are usually getting less than $1 per book. Now, if there are multiple multiple New York Times best-selling authors, then there are they may be getting a little more than that, but not a lot more. But most of us would get less than $1 per book. And if you self-publish, and you're publishing on Amazon, the books that you sell yourself, you're probably making a good $12 per book. And then if you sell them on Amazon, you're making more like $8. This is a $20 book I'm talking about. So you're still making a lot more per book if you self-publish. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that there are things to weigh. So what are publishers bring to the table? Well, there's certainly the cachet, right? And being with HarperCollins or Random House, there's just cachet for that. And it's going to help you get on, fresh air, things like that. And, if they do a good job with publicity, then they might get you some really great publicity, and you're not necessarily hiring your own publicist for that. Having said that, I have clients who've gotten 6-figure book deals and been assigned like the top publicist in the company. And if that book, one particular book, wasn't selling in huge numbers by it was either day 2 or 3, that publicist was gone working on another book, and he had no support. So he turned to me. I connected him with a wonderful publicist, and they helped him, and that really helped. And in the long run, he sold a really good number of books. But if he was going to depend on the publisher as he thought he could, there was going to be almost nothing, because they were excited about him, they invested in him, but then the staying power wasn't there. It was like, if you don't make a big splash very, very quickly, that publicist is on to other people, and you're just left there with, oh well, we tried and this book isn't taking off fast enough. So that's another example where you really want to think about this hard. And then there's also just the part about really going inside your heart, right? Really asking your inner muse or your inner guidance, your creative source, like, what is the best thing for this book, and how am I going to have the most impact? Because it does vary. And sometimes a traditional publisher does a great job, and you're so lucky you went with a traditional publisher because they have more distribution, and that's a big piece, right? You'll be in bookstores. But again, Amazon's gotten a bigger piece of the pie now, and publishers are generally not going to help you that much there. In fact, some of the things you do, because you're more likely to say, let me tweak things, let me try things, or let me pay for Amazon ads, which a publisher isn't necessarily going to do. So, but But again, I wouldn't say like there's black or white, do this or do that. It really, it's individual about the situation. And then it's also individual about really trusting your source about what's going to work best for your book.
Speaking of Amazon and the traditional book publishers and sellers, what's the market breakup at this point? I mean, does Amazon sell more books than anybody else? That's what I think I've seen or read. And how does that work? And I know they have international publishing, but I know they go through Ingram as a book distributor too in the countries where they don't have operations. How does all that work?
Yeah, so sometimes actually for international publishing, sometimes if you have a good agent, they might be able to hold back the rights for foreign rights. And so that agent will have somebody they work with in Europe, for example, and in Asia, and they'll try to sell your rights separately to a publisher there. And often that's how you make the most money. So that can be really helpful if you hold back those rights. If you are going with a traditional publisher. And yeah, Amazon, is the major player when it comes to book sales. But I am seeing lots of smaller bookstores popping up all over. We have a very successful independent bookstore in Wakefield, Rhode Island, Wakefield Books, and they've been around for quite some time. But they, this is an area that it's not got a lot of people, and yet they do a very, very good business. And then I just saw in Newport, I think in the past 2 years, a new bookstore popped up there. Now the name is not coming to me. Charter Books, I think. And another bookstore, I think Inkfish Books is pretty new, and that's in Warren, Rhode Island. So they're definitely, we're seeing more and more. Oh, and Stillwater Books it just moved from Barrington to Warwick, Rhode Island. So, lots of smaller bookstores that are figuring out how to do it well. It's not as easy as it once was. I mean, it was probably never an easy business, but, since Amazon has come along, it's harder. But we are seeing newer bookstores. And are you seeing that where you are?
Not so much, but I love going into Barnes and Noble.
Uh-huh.
And I could stay in there for hours. And I do frequent those kinds of stores. And if I'm in another city and I see a bookstore, I'll go in. And I love historic bookstores where they've got, antique books and books that are out of publication, perhaps, and you can get those. I think those are fascinating as well. It's just the feel of it when you walk in there.
Yeah.
It has a different vibe. I always, especially those antique ones, I think I'm walking into whatever that bookstore is in Harry Potter. I keep waiting for them to show me a magic wand or something along those lines.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that information about the publishing world. Let's piggyback a little bit to authors. And you talk about that you encourage authors to write in a heightened state. What does that mean?
So, I think we can all think of a time when we just feel like we're in the flow of life and we're being carried, right? It's like something's holding us up. We're just uplifted, high vibrations, some people might call it. And maybe too, where it doesn't feel like you're trying to write. It doesn't feel like you're reaching for something. It just comes through you. And most mornings, like that is how I start my morning, is I'm journaling and I might write down my dreams and then I'm writing some poetry or maybe working on a book and it just flows, there's just this ease. And so one of my missions here, I think, is to help people be in that state. And in my Get Your Writing Done program, what we do is we start with tuning in. And a lot of times I like to do that with movement, particularly with Qigong movement, which is very powerful. But we do various things. Sometimes we'll do a little yoga or dancing. We've done the hokey pokey, and also tuning into our breath, right? So it's like being present. Here I am now in the moment. And that's really important. We're running around all day and we often carry a lot of energy imprints from all the stuff we're doing, all the people we connect with. So one of the things I've been doing now is this beautiful practice that's very simple, where we just clear the inorganic chi, whatever's not ours, and we connect with our essence. And then we do that for the book as well that we're working on, as we clear the inorganic chi so that we're left with the essence of the book. I could show it to you real quickly if you want.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's basically at the chakras, but this is Qigong. So we're going to clear from our crown, third eye, throat, heart, solar plexus, lower dantian, way in, which is the perineum, knees, and feet. And I learned this from Robert Peng, who is an amazing Qigong master who came here from China. So let me show you. Crown, third eye, throat, heart, solar plexus, lower dantian, way in, knees, and feet. And off it goes to the horizon, because there's no such thing as bad chi. There's only chi that's not ours.
There's only chi that's not ours, because energy, and you can't destroy energy, it just changes form, right?
That's right.
So say more about that. There's nothing such as bad energy, but there's just energy that isn't ours.
Yeah. So, I think it's really a profound teaching. And when I did teacher training with Robert recently at Omega Institute, he said that, that don't worry about that you're getting rid of bad chi, or you have all this energy you have to get rid of. And sometimes when I do this, we call it the S curve for short, but when I do the S curve with people, sometimes they're like, oh, I have to do that a bunch of times. Like I have to get rid of all the bad chi. So that's not really the way to look at it. It's whenever we're connected with our essence, right? And we're really connected with love, there is no fear. Like if we're fully connected, the fear is gone, right? We're in love, and we're in our essence. And so we're just really clearing like the thought forms, the beliefs, the energy we've taken on, that again, like it's not ours. Let it go to the horizon. We're letting it go back to the void, I think, is how I view it. He hasn't said that about the void, but that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful teaching and a wonderful reminder. And now that I do that S curve at least once a day, often more, I have that opportunity to remind myself, like, oh, there's no bad chi. I'm just connecting with my essence, which I think when we do that, then we start to feel a lot less fear. And, it reminds me of your teachings, and I often think of that Superman pose that you taught us and that you teach everyone, because it reminds me of the natural stance in Qigong too. We're just in that space where we're connected to our essence, and we're in our own power. And that's where the best writing comes from too, or any creativity, right? Any creative act, the best thinking, the best loving, best communication, right? It's all from when we're in that clarity of essence, which you teach us to be in that space when we're doing any healing work.
Yeah, interesting. So do you think that I'm listening to you and I'm thinking this is brilliant, because what I'm getting, and see if this resonates with you, Lisa, is you're helping your students and your colleagues get into a vibrational frequency where they can access spirit and they can access their own internal self, their own spirit, which connects into the frequency of different information and helps them download information, and then that's the whole flow thing. Am I making sense of that?
That is exactly right. And actually, I'd love to share with you all 5 steps, because I'm realizing I only shared the first one. But to get in that heightened state and to support your creativity, that first step is that tune in, right? And I almost say they're probably not steps, but they're elements. So we do them as steps, but you could condense them to 1 or 2 steps if you wanted to. But I break them down into these 5 elements. So there's tuning in, and then there's engaging with your muse. And really, it's very simple, just acknowledging your own creative source. And for some of us, I do this guided visualization I call Meet Your Muse, not on all our calls, but at times with clients and students. And it's a wonderful way to kind of envision meeting your muse in kind of often a symbolic form or a form of a teacher, whatever comes to you when we do the exercise. But the inner muse is a part of us, and it's our access to creative source. But it often comes in these playful and creative forms. Sometimes very specific to a book, it's sometimes more specific to the person, but the muse can come in different forms over time. But it's really fun. But anyway, in our classes, we just sort of say, hello, muse. We keep it very simple. And then there's setting an intention. And so there's the bigger intention of a big project like your book. You might read a short vision statement that you read each time you work on the book. And then there's the intention you have for that day. And the intention can be, I'm going to write chapter 3, or I'm going to turn all that sciencey research into something that people can understand, or a story, or I'm going to tell the story of how Julie taught me to get in touch with my superwoman. And so that's maybe the intention for the day. What we do in my classes, because it would be a lot if everybody shared a big intention, we just share one word in the chat box and then somebody will read it. And it's so powerful because we just have these words like focus, clarity, weaving, connection, inspiration, whatever comes up for people. And then often you feel the fullness of those different words people offered. And it's almost like in the virtual room that we're creating when we're on a Zoom call, you can feel all that energy in the field, right? Surrounding us, supporting us. And it's very powerful. So then the 4th step is just to write, right? We've done these things to hook up, connect in, and then we just write. I say enjoy the writing, because the more you have that intention to enjoy, the more juicy it can be. And then the last step is to relax in gratitude. So, it's easy for us as humans to notice what we didn't do. Oh, I wanted to write 4 pages. I only write 2. Or this doesn't sound polished. Well, of course not, this first draft. But if we focus on the negative, we just get more of that. So you have a relationship with your inner muse, and you want that to be a loving, fun, appreciative relationship. And so it's important to say, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for showing up. Thank you, Lisa, for writing those 2 pages. And thank you to the community when we're writing community. Thank you to Spirit, or thank you to my guides. And when you do that, or even like, oh, I wrote 1 sentence I really love. Thank you for that sentence. When you do that, then more of that shows up, right? We all know when we get more of what we're grateful for. And so that gratitude is a really important step.
Well, and gratitude is such a high vibe too.
Yeah.
When you're in gratitude, you're able to access spirit. I'm interested in the muse part of the equation. Who is the muse? Is it guide? Is it spirit guides? Is it a collective of just a bunch of different spirits? Are we tapping into a frequency where the information's being downloaded almost kind of like a radio station or a satellite TV channel? What do you think is behind the muse? We hear that term a lot, especially with creatives, with authors and composers and artists and people like that. Who's the muse?
Well, the answer to all those things you brought up is yes, right? But so were these Greek muses, right? And I can't remember what they each represented, but there is this sort of ancient concept. But the way I see the muse is that it's both within us, right? It's something that's within us, and it's also, we can experience this coming from out there, outside of us. And the truth is there's no separation. So that's just part of how we in duality experience or imagine things. But of course, there's no difference between the muse being outside of us or inside of us. It's both. It's both and. It's a wave and it's a particle, right? So, yeah. So when I do this exercise, sometimes I'll do it with somebody and they say, oh, my muse is Jesus, of course, or my muse is God. And for other people, the muse is a bat or a mouse or a frog or the ocean or a jester or their grandmother or this rude Jewish lady who's smoking the entire time. It really, it really is. That was just what, one client, but it really varies and it's so fun. And sometimes, my muse is usually this kind of older magical woman who's always stirring this pot of alphabet soup, of course, because it's letters, right? Kind of magical. And I come into her little cabin and she often gives me the soup. Sometimes there's a little word written on the spoon with the letters. And sometimes she invites me to sit by the fire. And other times we, or end up on some other planet or whatever. But sometimes she's been in a different guise. One time she was just light. And one time the muse was much younger. And one time she was in this magical clothing that kept changing color and form. So, and certainly a lot of times I connect with animals and nature too. And especially if I'm outside, like singing my prayers in nature, I feel like that muse feels to me more the animals or the surrounding nature that's serving as the muse in those moments. So yes, this is something to really have fun with. I can give you a link to a free version of just, listening to that audio guidance to connect with the muse, because it is a lovely practice and it's always different. And the muse is really tapping into both your creativity and your inner wisdom, right? So when I have questions, I go to my muse because that's a profound place for answers.
Does your muse have a name?
No. Well, I just consider her the muse, so I've never asked her. She might.
Yeah. Huh. I got Lenora.
Oh.
When I just asked that question, Lenora. You've learned well, Grasshopper. I'm so proud. Because I agree with you, and we obviously covered this in the Angelic Attendant training. All spirit is the same thing. And what I believe and it's been my experience that spirit will communicate in different forms. You just did a great job of describing lots of different forms that your muse assumes in order to communicate something with you. And I believe that it helps us understand from a human perspective and be more receptive to the information that's coming in. And I always go back to the movie Contact that was out in the 70s or 80s with Jodie Foster. And spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, she's on a different planet and she's on a beach and there's a man walking towards her and she realizes it's her father, it's her deceased father, who died when she was a child. And then she figures out, well, it's really the alien dressed as her father so that she feels comfortable and she's happy and the alien didn't want to scare her. And I think that's a great example of how spirit communicates to us. When we're talking with a deceased grandparent, perhaps, it's still God talking through that image of the deceased grandparent. So it feels warm and loving and nurturing to us. And perhaps we're more able to receive. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's an interesting, because my mother-in-law recently passed away and she was an extraordinary woman, an artist, a sculptor and painter. And I feel her presence a lot. I was just in her house this morning writing poetry with a friend and really felt her presence. And so I think there is like aspects of that person's soul still around that has a personal aspect to it. But of course, like we all are one. We all are that divinity, right? We all are.
Spark of the
Yeah.
divine. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I think again, both and.
Yeah. But I think that here's my experience, that the divine is using those traits, that you could feel her energy. Sometimes you smell her perfume, maybe something will come to you and it's something that she would have said. All those modalities are used to get the information to us.
I see.
Yeah, if that makes sense. All right. Do you believe that all authors are channeling when they write?
Yeah. Are all authors channeling? So to me, I mean, certainly there is a feeling when I write of um, it's bigger than me. It's certainly bigger than the me like here and now, right? And it flows through. And but it flows through, but it's influenced by who I am and my life experience, and so it flows through, but there's a way that I'm participating. It's a co-creation, I would
Sure.
say, with
Yeah. Collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my experience. I can't speak for all authors. I certainly think a lot of us have a experience of almost like being a vehicle for the wisdom and knowledge and alchemy that wants to come through us in our words, the teachings. But I can't say that everybody's, because I just don't know. I can't speak for others, but I certainly see it in a lot of people.
Have you ever written something and then gone back and read it and thought, I don't remember writing that, but it's pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have too. I think, oh, okay.
Where'd
That's
that come
interesting.
from?
I kind of go back to when the muse thing, because I'm fascinated by that, especially with these linear thinkers like the medical providers at Harvard, and you're talking to them about, do you do that with them? How was that received?
I did it once. So actually, I do it with my private clients, many of whom are doctors that I met at Harvard Medical School's publishing course. And unfortunately, the course is no longer around, but it was around for over a dozen years, and I was in the faculty for that time. But so I mostly have done it with clients. Like, I always check in with people, and make sure they're comfortable with it. But I think people are attracted to you because inside they know this person, there's something this person has to offer me. And so generally that's worked well. But when I did it once in the grand ballroom for a ballroom full of doctors, it didn't go as well. I have to say, I felt great during the time, and there were people who came up to me afterwards and said that was so amazing, that and I want to work with you. But there were people who were really uncomfortable, and and the course director, she wants to have zero complaints, and there were a couple people. It wasn't a lot, but there were a handful of people who said, that was the most BSC, airy-fairy thing I've ever been asked to do. She had us close her eyes. Now, I did say close your eyes if you're comfortable, but, some people were really uncomfortable with it. And I learned my lesson. Like, it's not fair to the audience if you're not really thinking about who they are, maybe. But on the other hand, you're kind of putting something out there, and some people will respond because they're there, and some people will respond because they feel called, and they'll kind of have a new experience that they enjoy. And some people will be really uncomfortable and think, you're wasting my time, please get away. And I think that's fear talking. But, I learned my lesson.
Absolutely.
And after that, I really focused on more the nuts and bolts of writing a book proposal and getting published by a traditional publisher. What were people there for? And, but, you always bring, even, you tailor it to the audience and what they want, but you always bring yourself there. And I think that, just what you're offering energetically even is part of the experience. So, yeah, I learned to kind of pull back and do things that were more linear for that group, I would say.
Well, and if it makes you feel any better, that's how they react to somebody that has a different idea of
Yeah.
whatever their hypothesis is in medicine, too.
Yeah.
If somebody comes out with a new idea that seems radical at the time, it's not just airy-fairy stuff. And it isn't just medicine. It's just, I was in that industry for 30 years, so I know it well. But
Yeah.
it's like whenever a new idea, regardless of what the industry is or what the space is, it's always met with that same kind of reaction. But I'm hearing myself in my head going, oh, I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall in the room with that, with all those medical providers in there. Do you come from a family of authors? How did you even get to this?
Yeah.
I mean, you told us a little bit about your trajectory, but are there authors in your ancestry?
So I was told that in my father's lineage, the one person who could write, the scribe, I guess, in this small poor village in kind of Russia, Poland area, he was he was the scribe, the only person who could write. So what was my ancestor? So I guess that, and my father was an English teacher, and so he definitely was into reading and writing, and he wrote music and he wrote musicals. So he was. He was definitely hyper creative. And he wrote these, he said they weren't poems. He called them traps. They were like 3 lines or 4 lines, or maybe 2 lines. But these were very short pieces. And my mom is an artist, or was an artist. She was a watercolor painter. So I definitely came from a very creative family. My grandfather was a perfume chemist, but he was a photographer and painter on the side as a hobby. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of creativity in the family and a lot of love of words. My mother also was both my parents were more voracious readers than I was when I was young. When I was young, I think I was slightly dyslexic, so I read very slowly. And it was really not until I loved certain books. I loved the Madeline books. But as people started to read longer books, I was, not as voracious a reader because I was slow. But by high school, I was definitely becoming a voracious reader and reading everything by Herman Hesse.
Well, you went to MIT, so it didn't slow you down much, for heaven's sakes. My goodness. Does everybody have the ability to write a book?
I would say that if you feel inside of you that there's a book inside of you, yes, there's a way to write that book. If you don't, I wouldn't go there. Go where your heart is pulling you. But I do find sometimes there are people who feel the desire to write a book and they struggle with it a lot. And sometimes it's that they weren't told how to write. And it's just learning a few things that are going to make the writing so much better. And then having an editor who can help them really polish and fine tune. Other times there are people who have incredible wisdom, incredible story, and but they don't have the writing skill, or maybe they're even very I can be ADD myself, but they just are so ADD they really can't focus at all. And sometimes, a ghostwriter is the way to go. I have a number of ghostwriters that I recommend. I have part of my business is doing these referrals because sometimes that is really what people need. But if you feel the desire, I'd say first try to write yourself, unless you really know that's not you, because there is something wonderful about writing, even if it's new to you, or even if it's, not something you're entirely comfortable with. Try it first and see what happens, because you may surprise yourself, especially as you let go of what you think it should be.
Well, on the topic of ghostwriters, we've had Dina Gashman on the show, and she has published her own books. She's written her own books, but she's a ghostwriter for a lot of people, and sometimes even big celebrities that we would all know their name. And, she could tell us, but she'd be breaking their confidentiality agreement kind of a thing. How much are ghostwriters used? And do you find that ghostwriters are used a lot with celebrities, that we have these celebrity memoirs that come out a lot? I think of Prince Harry's book, Spare. And it's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's a terrific book, and there's a terrific ghostwriter that wrote it. How does that work? Do you find that that's the case with a lot of
It
celebrities,
is the case with
especially?
a lot of celebrities. And, I was working with someone who the network said to her, you need to write a book and we'll connect you with a great ghostwriter. And she said, well, I want to write my own book. That wasn't their vision. Yeah, sometimes, a lot of times people are encouraged that direction, and sometimes it's for the best. But I think when someone says, I've got a book in me that I really want to explore, I don't necessarily want to just hire a writer. Then, it's important to listen to that. But a good ghostwriter can do an incredible job of telling your story. But, it is um, it's a relationship, and trust. I have like 20 questions to ask a ghostwriter before you hire one. It's a free thing you can get on my website. Definitely I would say look at that, because and ask those questions, because you want to make sure it's the right match, and really listen for any red flags and understand your role, because a CEO who's too busy to meet and keeps canceling appointments, how's that writer going to write the book if they can't interview you to get, your wisdom, your experiences, your knowledge? Um, or, um, or, somebody will hire a ghostwriter and then they won't give the writer feedback. They'll say, I don't like it, but there's no specific feedback. Or they'll say it's fine, but really there were things they didn't like, but they didn't take time to read it. They just said it's fine, and then, months later they're like, no. So if you're hiring ghostwriter, make sure you're committed to the parts that are, and I do have a free thing about that too. People could just email me, lisa@lisatenner.com, and it just lists, these are the things that you'd be responsible for. Think about it. Make sure that you're committed to do those things if you want a good and successful book.
What are a couple of red flags if somebody's thinking of hiring a ghostwriter? That just right off the top of your head, what would be two of the red flags that would be reasons to pass?
Two of the red flags. I mean, they can't necessarily tell you who they worked for or even show you examples of their writing for that person, but they should be able to show you some writing, right? Or give you references or something. Um, and but know that those samples are written in a certain voice. They should have a much bigger range, right? Um, so don't just take that one voice as, oh, they can't write my voice, because it's different voice. Another red flag is just if they're not a good communicator, or they're promising the world, oh, you'll have a New York Times bestseller, it'll be great. Publishing is tough and it's competitive. And if people promise you the world, I would be very careful. Or you have the best story in the world, it's definitely going to get a publisher, or it's going to be a bestseller. I would be careful of that. A good ghostwriter is going to say, well, I can't make any promises. And the New York Times bestseller part is mostly up to you, because you're going to be selling it. I have to write a quality book, but the rest is going to be marketing to get it out there. So I trust people who really are realistic about it. And you may not make a ton of money. So if you're going to hire a ghostwriter, that should be money you're willing to risk. And a good ghostwriter is expensive. So another red flag is if they're super cheap. And that goes with editors too. I had a client who said, oh, I have this editor who gave me a cheap price for the editing. And I knew she was on a budget, because, she was thinking of working with me. And I said, you know what? I think you should work with her. That's a great price. And she had worked at Yale University Press. And so I said, I think it's a great price. I think you should hire her. And that was a mistake on my part. I should have said, ask her for samples. I just assumed because she had worked there, that she was really going to do quality editing. And it turned out she didn't. And my client ended up needing another editor. So I ended up working with her. And so she paid for both of us. So I learned my lesson, just because somebody has great credentials doesn't mean everything. Maybe she got fired from that job.
Right, right. Seems like we're all storytellers. Where do you think the desire to write or tell a story comes from? And do you think it's innate Is it innate in all of us?
I think it's certainly innate to listen to stories. We love stories, right? From the time we're children, we love to hear stories. And, you go to all these different cultures, and parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and neighbors, people in the community are telling stories to us from the time we're little. So I think we are wired for story. The question is, are we all wired to tell a story? And, I think some of us are. And I would say there's some people who are just extraordinary at storytelling. And I'm in awe of those people. But I think a lot of us have some of that, and then we learn the skill. And then there are people who haven't seen that in themselves, but they learn the skill. And then there's some people like that maybe isn't their thing, and that's okay. You don't have, but they probably won't have the urge to tell their story, or, maybe they'd have the urge to hire a ghostwriter. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
my husband, Tim, is an amazing storyteller. And when Jonathan, our son, was little, he would always tell stories at night. We'd put him in bed and I'd snuggle with him, and then Tim would be in the other bed, and he'd tell a story. And the stories always had an animal named Ralph in them. Always. There was always Ralph. Ralph was the donkey or the lamb or the whatever. And at the beginning, Lisa, you'll get a kick out of this. He would tell stories, and Jonathan, of course, was always the star. And then there were other people. And then there was always Miss Julie. And Miss Julie was the cook, or she was the, the housekeeper, or she was something like that. And so I finally had to have an adult discussion with him and say, what kind of standards are you setting here that I'm always the cook? So then after that conversation, Miss Julie became the bar owner, in the saloon in a Western with Ralph the horse, where he's stopping off to get a bowl of stew on his journey wherever he's going. Or Miss Julie was the banker, or Miss Julie was the mayor. And I said, okay, we need to just tweak this a little bit. But the stories just come out of him.
Uh-huh.
And the stories, even in the form of prayer, when we're
beautiful.
together in a family setting, he is the one that always gives the prayers. And the first time I heard him pray, with his big, deep Southern voice, dear graceful Heavenly Father, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh my God, this is Elvis praying in my dining room. First time I heard him do that when we were dating. But I think even prayer is a form of storytelling.
Yes, I think it can be. And, what I do think, we might not all be storytellers. We all have stories, though. And if we want to tell our stories, I think we can learn how to tell our stories, or we can find the medium that's right for us. It might be a song. It might be prayer. It might be a book. It might be a poem. It might be a movie, right? Or just a video on your phone camera. So it might be more about finding the way to tell our stories. And I think we all have ways we can tell our stories.
Yeah. Back to the mechanics of doing this. We've all heard about authors that have submitted a bazillion letters to publishers and literary agents and have gotten turned down. And to me, the most famous one is J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, who was turned down 12 times, and now she's a billionaire. So what's the process? Do authors need to have a literary agent in order to get to a publisher, or can they contact a publisher themselves if they decide they want to go that route? What are the mechanics, and what's the process with that?
That's a great question. So first of all, it depends where you're aiming, right? Because there are the huge publishers and their imprints. Then there are the small and medium-sized publishers. And to get an imprint is like, Random House has 1 million different smaller publishing divisions, right? And they'll have like a main editor for each of those, right? Who kind of sets the tone and what they're looking for. So the big, and a lot of how they got all those divisions is they basically ate up all these smaller companies. And, over time, like big companies have been getting eaten up too, and getting rolled up in these larger publishers. So there, but at the same time, there are small publishers popping up here and there too. And that's something to be hopeful about. But in any case, to get those big publishers, you usually need an agent, not always, but generally. For a medium publisher, again, often, but not always. And then for a small publisher, often you don't. But sometimes an agent will sell something to a smaller publisher too. Usually they'll start with the bigger ones because they're not going to make enough money when it's published by a small publisher to really justify the time they put in. So, but that's why I do have a lot of clients. One example I would say is New Harbinger. I have several clients who published with New Harbinger and didn't have an agent. So we went directly to the publisher. We've done that with other publishers like Central Recovery Press, and they were able to get a book deal, but they didn't have a big enough platform for an agent, but they did have enough to satisfy that publisher. New Harbinger is a good example because it's, very specific audience, right? Self-help, and a lot of therapists read their books and then recommend them to their clients. So they have a really nice niche where they have an audience that they've carved out. They have good relationships with bookstores, and they can often do a great job with a book. And so they certainly want to see that the author has a platform, but it doesn't necessarily have to be quite as big. So in that case, they didn't have a literary agent, but when it got time to they were getting a book offer, then I said, okay, here's an intellectual property attorney, and she will help you, and she charges $650, which is pretty reasonable to go through a contract and suggest all the alterations and actually talk to the publisher and negotiate that on behalf of the client. And then, they're not paying her any of their royalties, which normally you would pay an agent. So it's a one-time fee. And often she's been able to negotiate a little more of an advance too. So that's been really helpful for those clients. So I would say if you don't have an agent, make sure you have somebody negotiating that contract, so that and somebody who's really experienced with book publishing contracts is the best. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered the full question. I've already forgotten what the.
Yeah, you did. How is the best way to find an agent, or is there an efficient way to find an agent?
So, well, so there's like identifying an agent, which is, one way is I'll often identify particular agents for clients of mine, but there's also looking at the acknowledgments of books that are similar, maybe not an exact competitor, but books that are in the same arena, similar readership. And then there's going to conferences. That's sometimes a way to meet literary agents. And then there are some sites online. I think, trying to think, they're just not coming to mind this moment. Publishers Marketplace is another place you can look for book deals and see, who is publishing or who's representing what as an agent. But also, I think there's Query Tracker. There's a bunch of online websites, and if you say find a literary agent, you'll find those because they advertise. But those are ways, and they do have free versions versus paid versions of their programs. But that's a way to identify. Then you need a book proposal and query letter. And you don't want to send the query letter before you have the proposal. People come to me sometimes and they say, oh, I have an agent interested in my book and I just have to write the book proposal. And that's a big endeavor. Writing the proposal can often take as long or even longer than the book. There's a lot to do. And sometimes there's work to do on growing your platform or getting some pieces in place that are going to make a compelling case that you're going to sell a lot of books. So that's often can take time. Sometimes it can take years to get that platform where it needs to be for an agent or publisher, large publisher. So you don't want to send out the query letter until that book proposal is 100% ready to go. So that when they're excited about it and it sounds fresh to them, that's when they get the proposal immediately, not like 6 months later when it doesn't sound as fresh to them, or they don't even remember that you contacted them and they happen to be talking to a client and they think, an author of theirs, and they think, oh, I have a great idea. And they, like, it's your idea, but they don't even realize that because it's like subconscious. So don't send out a query until you have that proposal and it's 100% polished.
What's a platform? What do you mean by a platform?
That's your reach. And so that's online and offline. How many people are you reaching in a year and how you're reaching them? And particularly how many people in that target market or the target markets for your book are you reaching? So it could be and it should be, it's usually not just one thing, but it's your mailing list. It's speaking gigs that you do, especially in person. That's one way that people do sell a lot of books is when they're speaking in person. Podcast guesting or your own podcast, your social media. It's your, I'm trying to think what else, what might be part of your platform. It's like the blurbs you're getting and the people and bulk sales. So, it can include a lot of different things, but it's how you reach people and how many people you reach in a year. And you don't want a promotion plan that's based on pie in the sky. It should be based on what you're already doing and, how much you're growing.
Terrific. Back to J.K. Rowling for a minute. She was advised not to use her real name, which is Joanne Rowling, I believe, and to use J.K. Rowling instead because her publisher believed that young boys reading about a boy's fantasy trip in Harry Potter world wouldn't be as well received from a woman. So the J.K. Rowling was more of like, maybe it's a man writing it. That strategy seemed to work for her and Mark Twain too, for that matter. So how important is it to use your name or somebody else's name, like our own name or another name like that? And I would think that would be predicated on what the genre is.
To some extent. And I would say, I have two sons and they were both voracious readers when they were young. And one of them really even into high school. And some of their favorite writers were female, had female names. So I kind of take it with a grain of salt. I think, the British are more into that maybe than Americans too, I would say. But yeah, I mean, and maybe they were right. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, right? We really don't know. We know that book was successful, but we don't know if her, initials had anything to do with that. So, it's possible. And I know that is certainly something you hear a fair amount, but I'm a little bit of a skeptic, but I can't say for sure, right?
Yeah, you're not buying it. I can tell you're not buying that.
Women
Journaling's
power.
played yeah, that's it. Girl power. Absolutely. Journaling's played a big part in your journey. What are some of the benefits that you have experienced and are currently experiencing from journaling? How often do you do it? How do you do it? And just give us kind of an overview of what you do when you journal and how it's benefited you.
Okay. And I can go on this one. So just stop me if I go on too long. But okay. So in terms of how often I journal, right now I journal almost every day, or I write my journal almost every day. I usually do it in the morning. I wake up and often I remember my dreams. And that's a practice. It doesn't come, it doesn't come automatically necessarily. And there are tips to do that, to remember your dreams. But I think of it in my mind, then I write down the dream. And then often that will lead to playing with the dream to see what it has to teach me. I might do a dialogue with a dream character or other things, make some notes. And then often that leads into writing a poem, sometimes working on a book, or just gets me in the zone, and then I will work on a book. But that is a practice that's become more and more part of my morning. So lately, I really spend, a good hour lying in bed, just like remembering my dreams and kind of being with it, maybe a half hour to an hour, like feeling the love of the universe. And then I will start writing down the dream, and often writing down the dream and journaling. Might just be journaling about what's going on in my life too, but lately it's more feels like more poetry. But it varies. Like sometimes it's been more about a health issue and really trying to, or a relationship or a job. So I would say earlier in my life, though, it was more that, and now it's more creative projects just are coming when I journal. So I think those things wax and wanes and can change.
What makes your joy of writing journal so effective?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would love to show it to everybody.
Yeah, the joy of writing journal.
I'm very
great cover.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? I'm so happy with it, and it's gotten 5 awards, including the Nautilus and the Ben Franklin, and so. Oh yeah, didn't
Congrats.
You tell me Ben Franklin? You said to me Ben Franklin was one of my guides, and that was before I won. Where is it? Before I won the Ben Franklin Award. Isn't that crazy? I just made that connection.
Yeah.
How about that?
Oh my gosh.
How fun is that? So one of the things that I think makes it really special is every day it's 30 days of prompts to journal. And then after that, you actually have 30 more days of making your own prompts and responding to them. But each day there's a QR code. You scan it with your phone and you can watch a delightful video or listen to an audio meditation before you write. And, I wrote this during the pandemic, and I saw it as people needed to connect. And I felt like the blank page and a prompt can be enough, but I wanted to give people a sense of connecting and give them maybe more of me and what I had to offer from my heart, but also give them more of each other. So some of the videos are me teaching something, and some of them, about writing or creativity or journaling. And some of them are people just responding to the prompt. What's your favorite word? Or what's your favorite place to write? Or other things that have nothing to do with writing. What brings you joy? And I have people make lists of 10 things or something like that. And then they pick one and write about it. And I love that because it gives you a lot of choices. If one doesn't turn you on, it doesn't inspire you, you can just look down the list till you find one. But I think that variety of connecting with others or connecting with someone before you write can really give you a boost. And I don't know, like it's this extra energy that just I think gives people a little spark to get started. And so that's been really fun. People love the videos and the meditations too. There's a couple meditations. And I had so much fun with them. It was a lot of work creating like 30 plus of these videos and meditations. I don't know. I don't think I'm ever going to do a book with that many again, but it was really fun to do. And I think it makes it special. And a prompts journal is so nice because, sometimes the blank page is hard, but once you make a list of 10, you're already writing, you're already creative, but it's just a list. It's easy. And then from there, you pick something that, has a little juice for you and you're off. It makes it a lot easier, I think. So I think it's just, there's an ease to it. There's a fun, I think it's a playful book. And so I'm really delighted, and I'm delighted with hearing how different people are using it, because I hear from some people who are using it to write a book, and other people who've been using it. I actually had a Hay House author in one of my classes, and I offer prompts that people can use in the Get Your Writing Done program, but also people can just bring their outline and work on what they're working on. And it's just a few people who use the prompts, but she was using the prompt to find a story to get into each chapter. And it was so remarkable how each story related to the actual material for that chapter, but she was just using the prompt to get started. It wasn't, I never knew when I wrote those prompts that she had a chapter on such and such. So it's kind of magical how she used it. And then I had a mom who said, I used your book with my 8-year-old son who has anxiety. And every night we would do one of the prompts and together, we'd each do our own writing. And it helped him fall asleep, and it helped him with the anxiety. So, that was so beautiful to hear. I didn't think I was writing a book for kids, but it's really turned out like it doesn't matter what age you are. That was a surprise.
I thought it was super creative when you were telling me about it, when you were in the process of doing it. I thought, whoa, I'd never heard of anything like that. But I think it's obviously just in those two stories that you shared, it's been really a successful method to help people. And prompt is a great word for them, for those little snippets. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
Oh, wow.
I save the easy questions for last.
Why do we incarnate? Well, at some level, everybody's got to answer that for themselves. But I could tell you, for me, I do see the earth as a school with lessons, and we're looking in one way, we're here for the lessons for our soul, or for me, I'm here for the lessons of my soul. And in another way, I'm also here for what I have to offer everybody else who's here for different lessons or related lessons or similar lessons. And, sometimes we actually offer the lesson in behaving in a way that's opposite of what would be the lesson for them of what to do, right? But I think we're all here for each other and for the lessons we have to learn here and to teach each other, and the ways we can contribute to each other. And it's not a static thing, right? It's like we're ever growing in our understandings. Like another answer that I think is also true is we're here to experience duality so that we can understand oneness, right? And understand beyond duality. So, I think that's true too. What's your answer? I want to know.
I agree. My answer is we're here to create a life of joy. And the duality that you reference is the contrast. When we know what we don't want, it helps us create what we do want. And we're always creating. When we're done creating in this life, what happens? We die, we go to heaven, we create what we're going to come back in our next life and explore. So I think the creative process, and we've talked a lot about that here in this conversation, is never ending. And we find the joy in everything. And I love that you have that in the title.
Thank you.
Of your latest book.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm so proud of you. And I feel like a mama bear. I'm so proud of you. And I think you're doing great things for not only your clients and your students, but then down the line, all the people that benefit from your tutoring of those authors. Think of your reach, Lisa. My goodness. All the people that are reading all the books of all the people that you've helped bring their books to the marketplace. It gets really makes my brain kind of freeze when I think about, all of that influence, and it's all from you helping these people write their books and get their books out there.
And I think that's true of, you and all your students, is that that you're doing that, but then also all your students, that like every person that they help with healing, that healing doesn't just affect them or their immediate family, right? It's like everything we do to heal ourselves is contributing to the world in ways we can't even imagine. So I think that's true, like for all of us, that we often don't realize the scope of our contribution, and it's profound.
I agree. Well, thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. For those of you that have told me you want to write a book or you've got a story to tell, hopefully this has given you a lot of information, at least to start off. How can people find you online, on social media? What's the best way to reach you?
Well, probably the best is my website, lisatenner.com. And they can email me, Lisa@lisatenner, it's one N, I am on Instagram, Lisa Tenner Writes, and that has little underscores between the words. And LinkedIn, I want to check LinkedIn as often. And I do have a private but free to join Facebook group that's called Write and Create with Lisa Tenner. So people can look for that group and just ask to join. And there are just a couple questions to join it. And just let me know that you met me through Julie's podcast.
Yeah, and we'll put all that information in the show notes too. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us this week. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, and from Rhode Island too, where Lisa is. Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow Julie on Instagram and YouTube at Ask Julie Ryan, and like her on Facebook at Ask Julie Ryan. To schedule an appointment or submit a question, please visit AskJulieRyan.com.
This show is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. Please contact a licensed professional. The Ask Julie Ryan Show, Julie Ryan and all parties involved in producing, recording, and distributing it assume no responsibility for listeners' actions based on any information heard on this or any Ask Julie Ryan shows or podcasts.